A single note, high and haunting, echoed through the concert hall. Backstage, Ellie Chen clutched her old violin case, heart racing as the judges announced the next competitor. She'd scraped together every penny to enter this prestigious competition, only to face ridicule from elite musicians who saw nothing but a janitor with delusions of grandeur. What they couldn't see was the fire in her soul that burned brighter than all their polished pedigrees combined. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. The concert hall of the Westbrook Philharmonic gleamed under crystal chandeliers, each facet catching light like trapped stars. Ellie Chen pushed her cleaning cart along the perimeter, careful to stay invisible as the orchestra rehearsed. At 32, she'd spent the last 4 years mopping these floors, emptying these trash cans, and listening, always listening, to the music that filled this space. She paused behind a column, eyes closed, absorbing the complex patterns of Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto. Her fingers twitched at her side, unconsciously following the movement of the first violin's bow. "Jen, those bathrooms won't clean themselves." Ellie flinched. Mr. Hargrove, the facilities manager, stood glaring at her, arms crossed over his broad chest. "Sorry, sir." She pushed her cart quickly toward the exit. "I was just finishing up here. Less daydreaming, more working. We've got the competition preliminaries tomorrow, and everything needs to be spotless." "Yes, sir." In the empty bathroom, Ellie locked herself in the furthest stall, sat on the closed toilet lid, and pulled out her phone. The email was still there, unbelievable as it had seemed 3 weeks ago. "Congratulations, Eleanor Chen. Your audition recording has been accepted for the Westbrook International Violin Competition." She tucked the phone away, heart fluttering. 4 hours until her shift ended. 4 hours until she could rush home to practice. In her tiny apartment that evening, Ellie opened the battered case that had once belonged to her grandmother. The violin inside wasn't fancy. No prized Stradivarius like the soloists who performed at Westbrook. But it sang for her like nothing else in this world. She placed the violin under her chin, feeling its familiar weight, and began to play. The notes of Bach's Chaconne filled her small living room, bouncing off the water-stained walls and second-hand furniture. Ellie had learned to play as a child in Shanghai, before her family immigrated to America. Dreams of musical greatness packed alongside their meager belongings. Those dreams had faded with her parents' deaths, replaced by the brutal reality of survival. Yet music had remained her secret sanctuary. The next morning, Ellie arrived at work early, her competition outfit and violin hidden in her backpack. The concert hall buzzed with activity as competitors from around the world warmed up in practice rooms and lounges. "Chen, the green room needs attention. Someone spilled coffee everywhere," Mr. Hargrove barked. Ellie nodded and hurried toward the green room, pushing her cart. Inside, 5 competitors clustered around a piano, instruments in hand. She recognized James Whitmore immediately, rising star of the violin world, graduate of Juilliard, and son of the Westbrook Philharmonic's principal donor. She kept her head down, mopping quickly around the spill. "Honestly, the help gets worse every year," James said loudly. "You'd think they could at least find someone who understands English." His companions laughed, and Ellie's cheeks burned. She understood 4 languages perfectly, but remained silent. "They should keep the cleaning staff out until we're finished," a red-haired woman agreed. "The smell of those cleaning products affects my concentration." Ellie finished quickly and pushed her cart out, hands trembling slightly. In 2 hours, she'd stand on the same stage as these people. The thought seemed suddenly ludicrous. "Excuse me, A gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. An elderly man with kind eyes stood beside her cart. "Could you direct me to practice room 3? I'm afraid I'm a bit lost." "Down that corridor, third door on the right, sir," Ellie replied. The man smiled. "Thank you. Are you competing today as well?" Ellie hesitated, then nodded. "Wonderful. I'm Victor Kaminsky, one of the judges." He extended his hand. "Ellie Chen," she mumbled, shaking his hand briefly before turning back to her cart. "I should get back to work." 2 hours later, Ellie slipped into a staff bathroom with her backpack. Her hands trembled as she changed from her gray uniform into a simple black dress. It wasn't designer like the outfits she'd seen on the other competitors, but it was clean and pressed. She twisted her hair into a neat bun and applied a touch of lip gloss, the only makeup she owned. "I must be crazy," she whispered to her reflection. Her phone buzzed. "Contestant number 14, please report to the holding area." Ellie took a deep breath, tucked her violin case under her arm, and walked toward the stage door. She'd cleaned this hallway 1,000 times, but never walked it as a musician. In the holding area, several competitors warmed up their fingers or paced nervously. James Whitmore stood by the water cooler, surrounded by admirers. "I'm feeling good about this one," he announced. "Dad says the Philharmonic is already discussing a guest soloist position for me next season." His eyes landed on Ellie, narrowing in confusion. "Do I know you?" he asked, looking her up and down. "I work here," Ellie said softly. "I'm also competing." James's eyebrows shot up. "You? The janitor?" The others turned to stare. Whispers rippled through the small crowd. A woman with a clipboard approached. "Miss Chen, you're next. Please ready your music for the accompanist." Ellie nodded, clutching her violin case tighter. James snorted. "What are you playing? Mary Had a Little Lamb?" Laughter erupted around him. A blonde woman in an expensive gown leaned in. "They must have needed to fill diversity quotas," she stage whispered, loud enough for Ellie to hear. Ellie's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes forward. The stage manager gestured for her to move toward the wings. "Good luck, cleaning lady," James called after her. "Don't trip over your mop." As Ellie waited in the wings, her body went numb with fear. The judges' table came into view. 5 stern faces, including the kind Mr. Kaminsky. Beyond them, a small audience of music critics, sponsors, and fellow musicians filled the first few rows. Contestant number 14, Eleanor Chen, performing Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D major, first movement. The announcer's voice boomed. Ellie stepped onto the stage, legs wooden beneath her. The polished floor she'd cleaned countless times now stretched before her like an ocean she had to cross. She placed her sheet music on the stand for the accompanist, a young man who glanced up with thinly veiled skepticism. Ellie opened her case and lifted her grandmother's violin, feeling its familiar weight as a small comfort in this overwhelming space. Whispers rippled through the audience. Someone in the third row pointed, and Ellie recognized the facility's supervisor sitting there, mouth agape. Several cleaning staff members had slipped in at the back, their expressions a mixture of shock and curiosity. Ellie positioned the violin under her chin, took a deep breath, and nodded to the accompanist. His fingers struck the opening chords. For the first few measures, Ellie's nerves caused her bow to tremble slightly, the notes emerging tentative and thin. In the judges' row, a woman with silver hair scribbled something on her notepad, her lips pressed into a tight line. "Just play like you do at home," Ellie told herself. "Pray like no one is watching." She closed her eyes for a moment, finding her center, then launched into the main theme with renewed purpose. Her fingers danced across the strings, muscle memory taking over where fear had momentarily reigned. From the wings, James Whitmore watched, arms crossed, smirk playing at his lips. He leaned toward a fellow competitor. "She's keeping time at least," he whispered loudly. "I guess janitors develop rhythm from all that mopping." On stage, Ellie reached the cadenza, the most technically demanding section of the piece. The accompanist's hands stilled on the piano as the solo violin took flight, carrying the music forward alone. This was where most young violinists faltered, where technique separated the gifted amateurs from the true artists. Ellie's bow flew across the strings, her fingers executing double stops and arpeggios with a precision that belied her lack of formal training. In the judges' row, Mr. Kaminsky straightened, his pen hovering motionless above his notes. The silver-haired woman stopped writing altogether, her eyes widening slightly. James' smirk faded, replaced by confusion as he stepped closer to the stage entrance. The music poured from Ellie now, no longer constrained by fear. Each phrase told the story of her journey, the grueling hours working while others slept, practicing until her fingers bled, carrying the dreams of parents who had sacrificed everything to give her a chance. "Impossible," James muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "She can't possibly be playing from memory." But she was. The sheet music lay untouched on the stand as Ellie's body swayed with the rhythm, eyes closed, completely immersed in the music. The violin sang with a raw emotional quality that technical perfection alone could never achieve. The final notes of the cadenza hung in the air like suspended crystals before Ellie rejoined the piano accompaniment. The young man at the piano had recovered from his initial shock and now matched her energy, his fingers finding new inspiration in her playing. In the audience, Mr. Hargrove sat frozen, recognition dawning across his face. The cleaning staff members in the back had abandoned all pretense of discretion, beaming with pride and nudging each other. James Whitmore's face had transformed completely. Gone was the smug superiority, replaced by a bloodless mask of disbelief. The competitors who had laughed with him earlier now avoided his gaze, embarrassed by their earlier mockery. As Ellie approached the finale, she poured everything into the soaring melody. Every slight, every doubt, every moment she'd been made to feel invisible. Her bow danced across the strings with passionate intensity, drawing sounds from her modest instrument that rivaled instruments worth 50 times as much. When the final note faded, silence enveloped the hall for 3 heartbeats. Then, from the back row, a maintenance worker jumped to his feet, applauding wildly. The dam broke as others joined, critics, musicians, even some of the judges. Mr. Kaminsky smiled broadly, scribbling furiously on his notepad. The silver-haired judge leaned toward him, whispering something that made him nod in agreement. Ellie stood breathless, sweat beading on her forehead, her hands trembling from exertion and adrenaline. She managed a small bow before gathering her music and returning to the wings. James stood rooted in place, his complexion fluctuating between ghostly white and burning red. As Ellie passed him, he opened his mouth, but no words emerged. "Excuse me," she murmured politely, just as she had hundreds of times while pushing her cleaning cart past the musicians who never truly saw her. "Where did you?" he finally managed. "How did you?" "I practiced during my lunch breaks," Ellie said, "in the supply closet on the 3rd floor. It has surprisingly good acoustics." The accompanist stood up, extending his hand. "That was extraordinary, Miss Chen." Ellie shook his hand, her legs suddenly wobbly as the adrenaline began to fade. More competitors stared openly now, their expressions ranging from astonishment to grudging respect. A competition official approached with a bottle of water. "Miss Chen, the judges would like to speak with you after the next 2 contestants." "With me?" Ellie's voice came out as a whisper. "Yes, immediately." The woman smiled. That was quite a performance. Ellie retreated to a corner chair, clutching her violin case. Her phone buzzed, text messages from her coworkers flooding in. "You never told us." "Oh my God, Ellie. Boss looks like he swallowed his tongue." She couldn't help but smile, though her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Across the room, James paced frantically, occasionally glancing her way with a mixture of confusion and something that might have been fear. The blonde woman who had made the diversity comment earlier approached Ellie hesitantly. I wanted to apologize," she said, cheeks flushed. "What I said was inappropriate and completely wrong." Ellie nodded, unsure how to respond. This reversal of roles, from invisible to center of attention, felt surreal. Mr. Kaminsky appeared in the doorway. "Miss Chen, a word, please." As Ellie followed him into a small conference room, she noticed James watching, his composure cracking as he ran nervous fingers through his perfectly styled hair. 3 judges sat at a table, including the silver-haired woman. "Please, sit." Mr. Kaminsky gestured to an empty chair. "Miss Chen, I must ask, where did you study?" Ellie swallowed hard. "I had lessons as a child in Shanghai. After we immigrated, my parents couldn't afford lessons. I've been self-taught since I was 12. The silver-haired judge's eyebrows shot up. "Self-taught? With that technique?" Ellie nodded, hands clasped in her lap to hide their trembling. "I watch videos online, and I listen here at the hall. I've learned a lot just observing." The judges exchanged glances, communicating in the silent language of those who've spent decades evaluating talent. "Your interpretation of Tchaikovsky was..." Mr. Kaminsky paused, searching for the right word. "Authentic. Raw in places, certainly, but with an emotional depth many trained musicians never achieve." "Thank you," Ellie whispered, still not entirely believing this conversation was happening. "We have 2 more questions," the silver-haired judge said. "First, are you currently employed by this venue?" Ellie's stomach tightened. "Yes, I'm on the maintenance staff." "I see. And second, why did you enter this competition?" The question hung in the air. Ellie took a deep breath. "Because music is who I am, not what I do," she said simply. "Every day I clean this hall, I imagine what it would be like to play here, just once." When Ellie emerged from the conference room 20 minutes later, a small crowd had gathered. Her colleagues from maintenance stood awkwardly in their gray uniforms, grinning and giving thumbs-up signals. Several competitors lingered nearby, stealing curious glances. James Whitmore stood with his father, a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit, who was speaking intensely with the competition director. When they spotted Ellie, the elder Whitmore's face darkened. "This is highly irregular," he was saying loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Staff members participating creates a clear conflict of interest." Ellie froze, her momentary triumph evaporating. Of course this would be taken from her too. "Mr. Whitmore." "Mr. Whitmore." Kaminsky's voice cut through the tension as he stepped from the conference room. "The rules state any musician meeting the age requirements may audition." Ms. Chen followed proper procedures. James Whitmore Sr. scowled. "My family has donated millions to this institution. We expect certain standards to be maintained." "Dad," James hissed, face flushing, "not now." The competition director cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitmore, talent is talent, regardless of whether it comes from someone who cleans toilets The elder Whitmore's voice cut like ice. Ellie's co-workers shifted uncomfortably. She felt her face burning, but forced herself to stand straight, clutching her violin case like a shield. "Actually," Mr. Kaminsky interjected, "the judges have unanimously agreed to advance Miss Chen to the finals." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. "Congratulations," the silver-haired judge added, appearing beside Kaminsky. "Your technical execution needs refinement, but your musicality—" She shook her head in wonder. "It's a gift that can't be taught." The Whitmores stormed off, James trailing behind his father like a scolded child. As they passed, Kames muttered, "This isn't over." Back in the staff room, Ellie was surrounded by her colleagues, their excitement bubbling over. "Why didn't you tell us?" Maria from housekeeping demanded, hugging her tightly. "I didn't think I'd make it past the recorded audition," Ellie admitted. "I didn't want everyone to know when I failed." Mr. Hargrove approached awkwardly. "Chen, I need to speak with you." He gestured her away from the group. "The administration feels your competing creates a complex situation. They're offering a leave of absence until after the competition." Ellie's heart sank. "Am I being fired?" "No," Hargrove quickly clarified. "Paid leave. They're concerned about appearances, that's all." Relieved, Ellie nodded. "I understand." That night in her apartment, Ellie couldn't sleep. Her phone kept lighting up with notifications, colleagues sharing articles from local arts blogs that mentioned the maintenance worker virtuoso. One music critic had already posted a review calling her performance the revelation of the preliminaries. 3 days later, Ellie stood backstage for the finals, wearing the same black dress. She'd used her unexpected paid time off to practice relentlessly. James Whitmore performed just before her, his Paganini technically flawless, but somehow mechanical. When he finished, the applause was polite, but restrained. As Ellie took her position center stage, she noticed something different. A scout from the prestigious Eastman School of Music sat in the front row, alongside representatives from 3 major orchestras. This time, she began with confidence, her bow steady and sure. She'd chosen Sibelius's violin concerto, complex, emotional, and rarely attempted by non-professionals. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential reward. From the first haunting notes, Ellie transported the audience to a frozen Nordic landscape. Her modest violin sang with a voice entirely its own. Not the polished perfection of conservatory training, but something wild and honest that reached straight into the heart. When she finished, the standing ovation was immediate and thunderous. Mr. Kaminsky wiped a tear from his cheek. Even James Whitmore, seated sullenly in the audience, looked stunned. That evening, Ellie stood on stage among the finalists, hardly believing her presence among them. When they announced the winners, her name came third, a bronze medal finish that sent shockwaves through the classical music community. As Mr. Kaminsky placed the bronze medal around her neck, he whispered, "This is just the beginning." 6 months later, Ellie sat in a practice room at Eastman School of Music, where she'd been offered a full scholarship. Her violin, no longer her grandmother's, but a loaned Guarneri, rested beside her as she reviewed sheet music for her debut with the Rochester Philharmonic. A message buzzed on her phone, a photo from her former co-workers, all wearing Team Ellie t-shirts for her upcoming performance. She smiled, remembering how they'd pooled their money to buy her a proper concert dress for the finals. The door opened, and her new mentor, Professor Williams, entered. "Ready to work on that third movement?" Ellie nodded, rising to her feet. In the polished window reflection, She barely recognized herself. Confident, poised, visible. Music finds its voice in unlikely places, she told a young student yesterday. The world is full of hidden symphonies waiting to be heard. She lifted her violin, remembering the supply closet where she'd once practiced in secret, and began to play, no longer invisible, no longer silent. Her true self finally taking center stage.